Hello again, word lovers, and welcome to this, what possibly should have been the first video, because etymology is about the meanings of words. But we haven't asked, what does a word mean yet? Well, that's philosophy, not etymology, but let's take a little break and ask ourselves the question. Now, as Bertrand Russell said, philosophy very often will take a statement which seems to be blindingly obvious and make you doubt it. So let's make a blindingly obvious answer to the question, what does a word mean? If I say table, it's obvious, isn't it, what a table is? Look, there it is. But what about to table a motion? What about a water table? What about a timetable? What exactly does table mean? It's tabula, isn't it? It all comes from that, so there must be a root meaning. The philosopher Quine makes an interesting observation. He says, imagine you going into a jungle and you see a sign, an arrow, painted on a tree. This obviously indicates there is a path in the direction of the arrow, doesn't it? How do we know it's not pointing the other way in the manner of a shepherd, shepherding his flock? Why do we use the symbol of an arrow? Because we come from hunter-gatherer societies. We're very familiar with the arrow, the direction of the arrow. So we just assume that that's what it means. Well, let's look at some theories. Perhaps the most famous philosopher of language of the 20th century was Ludwig Wittgenstein. And he saw the world not in terms of things, but of facts. So if I say the table is brown, yes, we can analyse each word in that sentence, but we're expressing a fact, which may or may not be a fact. We may be mistaken. If you go to super fast, condensed internet quote page snippets, you will find Wittgenstein saying, the meaning of a word is its use. That's the sound bite, people, and it is taken completely out of context. They forgot the first part, which says, for a large class of cases, though not for all, in which we employ the word, blah blah blah, the meaning of a word is its use. So what do we say to that? If I had a dog, for example, and taught the dog that bim bam meant sit up on your hind legs, that's what it would mean, isn't it? To me and the dog. But if the dog could speak, Wittgenstein says, we couldn't understand it because we're not dogs. So he reduces back to what he calls a form of life, a question which was addressed by Nagel in his famous paper about consciousness. What is it like to be a bat? Let's keep in the human sphere for a while and follow a Wittgensteinian argument. A man keeps a diary and writes S when he has a certain sensation. He can't describe this sensation. Who decides whether S is used correctly or not? That person. Which means that if something seems similar to something previously that happened to me, I write S. Wittgenstein's point here is this is not a language. Again, he didn't say private languages were impossible, which he's often quoted as saying. He's trying to say that something very, very private, like the way I experience the colour green or a pain, we tend to think of it as a sense impression or a very basic neural response that is only accessible to me. But pain isn't a thing you can point at. It's not a table. Love isn't a table. Democracy isn't a table. But nor are they nothing. Nor do they lack meaning. Okay, so we've stumbled into a non-exciting definition of meanings of words. They are a kind of community of agreed norms. As I record this video, Merriam-Webster is in the act of changing its definition of racism, for example. So this would have very profound effects on legal and social matters. But who decides to change the definition? And who decides on the new definition? Here we come to another of my bugbears, the prescriptive grammar against the descriptive grammar. Descriptive grammar simply tells you the way people use language, whereas prescriptive offers you grammar rules which you are supposed to follow. This is now becoming a little deep, as Carnap makes his arguments on the basis of science, really. Three-dimensional external worlds, light waves, inputs, trying to equate linguistics more with psychology. But digging through all of it, we can arrive at one conclusion. There is a difference between these questions. What does this mean for a particular person or for a particular group? Could be a word, could be a symbol, could be a battle cry. And the second question is, what is the connection between that person or group and that symbol? How does it come to have meaning? We briefly looked at Nietzsche's etymology earlier when he was exploring the word good. And Nietzsche, almost proto-Wittgensteinian, simply analyzes the way in which the words are used and their associated qualities. And his basic argument is that Christianity has replaced the old Roman Dionysian virtues of strength, character, dignity with other values such as humility, modesty, non-violence, and obedience to God. Umberto Eco, the author of The Name of the Rose, Italian philologist, doesn't agree with Nietzsche. His book on etymology is called Kant and the Platypus, and in this book he asks some interesting questions. In chapter 3, he explores the way the Aztecs assimilated the new phenomenon of the horse. Where would you put the horse in your language boxes if you'd never seen one before? In the following chapter, he talks about the difference between dictionaries and encyclopedias, categorical knowledge and knowledge by properties. And again, his example is a strange animal arriving somewhere it's never been seen before. In this case, the platypus in Europe. The platypus is a nice example, but another possibility would have been the famous black swan, as philosophers used for many years. But the fact that you can't prove that all swans are white, even if every swan you've ever seen is white, is a challenge to a certain philosophy, a certain way of seeing the world. In this case, the logical positivists had a terrible time trying to untangle that. Their idea was that if the word doesn't refer to something concrete, it's actually meaningless. So that would mean words like God would be meaningless. Too fuzzy to define. But there we run aground on, for example, extraterrestrial life exists in the universe. I can't disprove it, but it's not nonsense. So when we're asking what words mean, and we're actually asking about a Neolithic Berber, for example, how can we put ourselves in that person's place? Mathematician Frege had a nice little system where he separated the relationship between a word and its subject into these categories. X believes that P, X desires that P, X intends that P, X discovered that P, and X knows that P. The last one of those would be a very, very thorny problem, but we're not going to go into it. We're not going to start, how do we know things? We have enough on our plate. Let me try to disentangle this last idea. Take this sentence. Tom believes that Mark Twain wrote Huckleberry Finn. As far as we know, that's correct. That's true. Now the second sentence. Tom believes that Samuel Clemens wrote Huckleberry Finn. Now Samuel Clemens was Mark Twain's real name, so they're both directly pointing at the same object. But maybe Tom doesn't know that Samuel Clemens is Mark Twain's name. So Tom believes that Samuel Clemens wrote Huckleberry Finn is false, while Tom believes that Mark Twain wrote Huckleberry Finn is true, even though Mark Twain and Samuel Clemens are the same person. Ha! Work that one out. These questions are not new. They're kind of 20th century, but if we go back to the 19th century, we find the incredible Renaissance man who didn't live in the Renaissance, Wilhelm von Humboldt, exercising his mind with the question, what is language? His idea is that it's a kind of internal dialogue, which uses the same internal dialogue as the thinker's native language. This has the potential to develop into some kind of nationalistic groupthink, separating race from race, and indeed von Humboldt did believe that the Germanic languages were some kind of pinnacle in the language tree. So the fact that there are different languages doesn't mean that there is a world and we just have different signs and sounds to indicate things in the world, but in fact we have fundamentally different views of the world. A handy example of this is the American linguist William Dwight Whitney, who, rather strangely for a linguist, thought that the Native American languages should be wiped out on the grounds that they expressed a worldview formed by savages. Up at the top of America, in northern Canada, Franz Boas was working with the Inuit people and was led to become an ethnographer due to his interest. His argument was that all cultures are worth the same and there is no such thing as a primitive language. His student Edward Sapir continued this line of thought, but almost united it with earlier ones by stating that no two languages are ever sufficiently similar to represent the same social reality. Different societies are different worlds, and the different worlds cannot be united by sticking multi-use labels on them. The ethnologer Worth was also studying Native American languages and noticing several connections. In his case, he was sufficiently intelligent to look at the grammatical structures as well. And there's a thing. I don't want to deviate too much from this, but as an example, why do you say, I have cold in French, Spanish, but I am cold in English? Is the coldness a property that I share in, or is it a thing outside of me of which I partake? If I ask a taxi driver to go to a street and he says it's the other direction, in Spanish he would possibly say, me da la vuelta, it gives me the turn. But what? What gives you the turn? This seems to be confusing to English speakers, but nobody ever has a problem with it's raining. What is raining? We can see how the grammatical structure of a sentence might lead us to see similarities where there are none. Gilbert Ryle makes this point famously in The Concept of Mind. If I want to see Oxford University and I keep telling you there isn't an Oxford University, it's just an idea, it's 34 colleges plus a union and they're all in different parts of Oxford, and you insist on saying I want to see the university, you're asking the wrong question. Very easy to do, isn't it? Where is the centre of town? Where is the post office? Where is the university? Where is mind? Where is the number 5? What time is it in Africa? What time is it on the moon? What time is it on the sun? What time is it on Jupiter? It's very easy to take a simple grammatical order, substitute some words, and think that you're asking a similar question. When did the universe begin? Well, I hope that has sufficiently confused you. That's what philosophy's for. And basically, I just wanted to draw the attention to that. If you're saying, for example, if you use the word Pegasus, we all know what Pegasus is. It's a winged horse. And we also know that there never were any winged horses. But that doesn't mean Pegasus doesn't mean anything. In fact, the community of speakers that use the word Pegasus all agree that it's fictional. So there's no problem. Or if I were to say to you, the morning star today looks brighter than the evening star last night, how would you analyse that philosophically? The morning star is the evening star. The meaning of a word is its use, said Wittgenstein. We have inherent grammatical structures in the brain, says Pinker. Meanings can change dramatically over time, says Nietzsche. Language simply presents a picture of the world, says Wittgenstein. Now, they may all be compatible. Luckily, you don't have to write an essay on this.